What happened on this particular day when it started was that all kinds of alarms went off. There was an audio alarm that went off in the prison to alert for carbon monoxide, and there was a strobe light alarm. And so, what was the response? They turned off the audio alarm and put the men back in their cells, where they continued to be exposed to carbon monoxide while they took their sweet time trying to figure out what was going on. And so that was a needless thing to do to these men. It was grossly negligent. And it was an indifference that the prison showed to the gravity of the situation and to the human lives involved, to such an extent that some of the employees of the prison were exposed because of the negligence of the prison authorities in response to this grave incident of carbon monoxide poisoning. And so when the gas got high enough, way, way, way beyond federal limits, way, way beyond world limits, way, way beyond any reasonable limits to what ought to happen, the gas got so intense that the men alerted the prison because of how they were behaving. They were vomiting. They couldn't stand. They were falling out. They were dizzy. They couldn't control their bowels or their urine. It was a terrible thing. Many lapsed into unconsciousness. And so they were brought out into the yard and then taken back to the same cells that they were in, where the carbon monoxide was persisting because they had not yet been able to turn off what it was that was causing the carbon monoxide. And it looks like it was caused by a faulty boiler. And you can imagine how huge boilers are to deal with a prison population. They're really big. And if they are not properly maintained, and this one wasn't, they get out of tune and they emit large quantities of carbon monoxide. And so the alarms were ignored. The men were subjected to prolonged exposure unnecessarily. It was a mess. And so we have filed this suit today, or rather earlier this week. We have filed this suit to get the federal court in Baltimore to order that these men get proper diagnosis and treatment. It's a rare kind of case called a mandamus petition, meaning getting a court of law, in this case a federal court, to order people to do things that they have a duty to do where there's no discretion involved. And so when people need adequate medical care, that's not a discretionary act, that's mandatory. And so we meet all the requirements of mandamus, even though it's a rare remedy. And we can't wait to get into court to help these men. As a footnote, we haven't been able to see them since this incident happened in August of 2021. The first excuse was COVID. The second excuse was COVID. The third excuse was COVID. And so we haven't been able to have a face-to-face meeting or an electronic group meeting or an electronic individual meeting except by telephone with any of these men. And that's a damn shame. And that's the other thing we're asking for the court to do, to give us immediate access to talk to these men in person so that we can adequately represent them. And there are tapes of what happened, because in prisons, everything is taped. Every move that an inmate makes is taped. And so we want all of those tapes. We asked for them a long time ago. We still haven't gotten them. And so we want the federal court to order production of these tapes immediately, if not sooner, because we want to dig into the meat of this so that we can file an appropriate lawsuit to get these men the compensation for their injuries that they deserve. And one of the points of compensation is continued lifetime medical treatment, because the conditions that they have developed as a result of carbon monoxide poisoning require lifetime treatment, require lifetime evaluation, because carbon monoxide poisoning is an insidious thing. You can think that you're in the clear and all of a sudden something flares up that's catastrophic in terms of your consciousness or your ability to use your body properly or to make sure that your body is functioning adequately. carbon monoxide is a terrible poison. And so one of the good things that ought to result from our filing of this lawsuit is that the public will become aware, and many for the first time, that if you have a hot water heater, boiler that's gas fired, you better make sure that the landlord maintains it. And if you own your own home, make sure that that boiler is maintained, it's adequately inspected, it's working as it should work. Make sure you have carbon monoxide detectors in every room of your house. And we've handled a lot of carbon monoxide cases. And what usually happens is a combination of two things. Your boiler wasn't properly vented, or it wasn't properly maintained. And so the carbon monoxide from a gas-fired boiler then gets in your house. Before you know it, your kids have been exposed. You've been exposed. The IQ, the functional IQs of kids exposed to carbon monoxide drop precipitously. The functional IQs of men, women exposed to carbon monoxide as adults drops precipitously depending on the dose. And in this case, the dose was tremendous. And so there's no question, because of the dose being tremendous, and the way you know the dose is tremendous is you see the results of the dose. And the results of the dose are well known. And it's like I said before, it's unconsciousness, dizziness, vomiting, failure to be able to control your bowels or your urine. And some people lapse into unconsciousness and die. Fortunately, this didn't happen to anyone involved in this incident. But there's no question that the brain damage will be shown to be extensive and permanent. And the rehabilitation that these men need to lead adequate lives, they won't be able to lead normal lives again, but just to get along adequately is tremendous, because it affects so many parts of the body.
Mr. Murphy, what do you say to those who would argue that that's a part of going to prison? You did the crime, you do the time.
Well, dogs don't get treated that badly. We don't treat animals as badly as that.
I'm glad you said it.
And so it's nonsense that because people have gone to prison that they ought to be treated like this. Nobody wants this, and the Constitution says you can't do it. And so this isn't a matter of opinion. The law is that these men are entitled to be adequately diagnosed and treated for their medical conditions. And each federal prison has contracted with medical providers nearby to do exactly that. But that didn't work for these men. And they're way in a rural area in West Virginia. And they're about 2 hours away from Charleston in a mountainous area. And so they didn't get the immediate help that they needed because nobody planned for this. Nobody foresaw this, even though this was foreseeable. Because it's always foreseeable that a gas-fired hot water heater, a boiler, can be out of tune, can spew carbon monoxide. That is foreseeable. But nobody planned for this at the prison. Nobody had the medical system at the ready in case something like this happened. Nobody knew what to do when the alarms went off. Nobody had been adequately trained to know what a carbon monoxide alarm was. And there may have been some, I don't give a damn about it because it doesn't affect me going on. Because this happened in one building in the facility. And the facility had about 3-4 main buildings, but the administration wasn't affected. And so you didn't see the administration acting quickly and reasonably. What you saw was turn that thing off. You know, it's just smoke alarm, but there's no smoke. It must be malfunction, you know, that kind of stuff, because nobody was trained. So there was a failure in every way in this prison in dealing with this catastrophic event that affected the lives of hundreds of men. There were over 200 men who were exposed. We represent 86 of them in this petition. When we file additional stuff in this case, you'll see that we represent about 120 of them. So Any more questions?
Yes, 25% of the world's inmates are in America. Does this suggest that there's a larger problem on how inmates are treated in America?
We have always, as lawyers, as citizens, as Black people who have relatives and friends in prison and who have been subjected to mass incarceration for the past, since Richard Nixon started it, and Ronald Reagan increased it fourfold, and Bill Clinton increased it fourfold. Then, that far back, we've been exposed to mass incarceration. And for the first time, we're seeing the tremendous negative impact that this has had on the Black community, especially among people who don't have the money to escape what we're seeing today. The schools have gone to hell. The housing has gone to hell. The social services have gone to hell. The food has gone to hell. The healthcare system has gone to hell. Everything has collapsed in these communities of color across the country because of the impact of mass incarceration and institutional racism and individual bigotry. And so this is a serious problem that's only getting worse. And we as a society have not made an adequate response to helping people in jail to live under humane conditions. And in most jails, they don't. And in most prisons, there's little or no rehabilitation. There's little or no opportunity to get education. There is little opportunity to get the kind of training that would prevent people from going out into the world with a previous conviction and not being able to get decent employment. That's a huge problem. And so we have a recidivism problem because nobody cares about these men after they get a criminal conviction. And when they come back, they see a hostile world. They see a world where they haven't been trained to do the jobs of today. The last training they had was years earlier. And it was usually a low-level kind of training, although there are many people who got caught up in the prison system who have been well-educated. Not as many as we would like, and too many for our own good. So this is a problem.
Thank you, sir.
Have you seen a case like this before, this magnitude, or is this kind of unprecedented?
No, this is the biggest carbon monoxide release, I think, in the history of America. I don't know of any, and we've looked. I think this is the biggest mass exposure of carbon monoxide in a place where people were forced to live that we've ever seen. And this is a warning that this could happen again if we don't change our ways. And to who was it, Aunt Louise, that Fred Sanford used to say, if they don't change their evil ways, this is going to continue. And we don't want it to continue. We want it to stop. Isn't that the right thing to do, to stop it? And that's what we're about doing.
You know, Mr. Murphy, prisons are big business in America.
Yes. And, businesses like to cut costs. And when there are inmates involved, cutting costs is something they can get away with. And so private prisons have been a huge problem. There have even been people posing as lobbyists who had nothing to do with private prisons, who've been advocating to state legislatures across the country for higher sentences for crime. Well, they actually were agents in disguise of the private prison industry, which thrives when sentences are increased. And so we have that to deal with, and we shouldn't have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, as three Black men here, we're here to highlight the fact that the prison industrial complex is more concerned with the bottom line and with cutting corners and in preserving the economy of that industry, rather than respecting the Eighth Amendment, which guarantees all these men the right to this adequate medical care and to be able to be treated as human beings.
So I have, over the last year and a half, I have been in personal contact with a number of our clients. And I can only tell you that every one of them they can barely hold a conversation. They complain of blurred sight and hearing problems, nausea. Most of them talk about tremendous headaches that never stop. And these are not going to go away. And so it pains us to have to listen to the constant complaints and requests for medical attention that they have yet to receive. So yes, we're about trying to see if we can get that care and begin the process of trying to do as much as we can for every one of them so that their lives can be appreciably better.
How does it make you feel?
How does it make me feel to have to do that?
Have to deal with a case like this? I mean, considering that America's prisons are loaded with black men, and black women are the fastest growing demographic. Do you feel like you're defending or looking out for a family member or others in the very community out of which you come?
I feel like we're representing the underprivileged and the underrepresented, and I am proud to be a part of a firm who does that. I mean, that is our forte. So I look forward to this, and we're going to do the best we can for every one of them.
Malcolm, did you have anything to say?
Oh, I think Ron put it perfectly.
This is tragic. It breaks our heart on a daily basis. It really does. When we share that with other people, they wonder how such a thing could happen in America. And the truth is, it's been happening and nobody cared to black folks. It's been happening to Latinos. Nobody cared. It's been happening to women. Nobody cared. It's been happening to inmates of all races, colors, and creeds, especially poor whites. Nobody cared. And so this is our opportunity yet again to solve a huge, huge problem that these individuals have and help them, hopefully, at the end of the day, to go on to lead productive lives, notwithstanding their permanent injuries.
Mr. Murphy, do you expect the prison guards to join this lawsuit? The prison guards who were poisoned?
We'll have to wait and see what happens. I think that the natural inclination of people in that position, being prison guards who are supervising inmates, would be to say, no, I don't want to get involved with the inmates. I'll deal with the boss directly because they don't want to get punished if they file or join a lawsuit. But when they see the severity of their own problems develop, I think that's going to go away and they're going to do what's in their own best interest and overcome their fear of retaliation.
Thank you.
Thank you.